François Lolonais. Before Blackbeard became a legend, there was a pirate so feared by Spanish sailors that his death sounded less like justice and more like revenge. François Lolonais was a French buccaneer who operated from Tortuga in the 1660s. He attacked the Spanish Main, including Venezuela in 1667, and built a reputation so vicious that later writers called him the Flail of the Spanish. But the Caribbean has a way of turning hunters into hunted men. On his final campaign toward Central America, Lolonais found himself far from the ports that had made him powerful. The raid failed. The land closed around him. The crew that once followed him into terror could no longer save him from it. His exact final moments sit between history and legend, but the pattern is clear. A man who made his name through fear ended in a place where fear no longer worked. And that is where this story begins. Because every pirate believed the black flag meant freedom. For most of them, it was only a countdown. But the next captain did not vanish in the wild. He walked toward a crowd, a rope, and a death that failed the first time. Captain Kidd. William Kidd died insisting he had been misunderstood. That is what makes his ending so strange. He was not just another sea robber in his own mind. He had sailed as a privateer, one of those legal raiders governments used when piracy was useful and condemned when it became embarrassing. But when powerful men needed a villain, Kidd became easy to sacrifice. On the 23rd of May, 1701, he was taken to Execution Dock in London. The place was not chosen by accident. It was where the Empire turned sea criminals into public warnings. The crowd gathered, not just to watch a man die, but to watch the law prove that no captain could escape it. Then the rope broke. For a few seconds, Kidd was alive again. Imagine the silence after that fall. The condemned pirate breathing, the crowd staring, the hangman forced to try again. There was no miracle. Kidd was hanged a second time, and his body was later displayed as a warning at Tilbury Point. Kidd's death felt like fate hesitated. Charles Vane never gave fate that chance. He was destroyed by pride before the gallows ever touched him. Charles Vane. Charles Vane lived as if surrender was worse than death. When the king's pardon offered pirates a way out, many captains considered taking it. Nassau was no longer the free pirate refuge it had been. Governors, informers, and naval ships were closing in. Vane chose defiance. At first, that made him look fearless. But a pirate captain only stays powerful while his crew believes he can lead them toward profit and survival. Vane's mistake was thinking fear could replace trust. When he avoided fighting a stronger French ship, his men saw caution as cowardice. They voted him out and chose John Rackham in his place. That moment was Vane's first execution. Before Jamaica hanged him, his own deck had already rejected him. After more raids, storms, and misfortune, Vane was captured, tried in Jamaica, and hanged in March 1721. He had spent his life refusing to look weak. In the end, his crew remembered him exactly that way. And the man who replaced him would become famous too, but not because he was stronger. He became famous because of the women who made his own courage look small. Calico Jack Rackham. John Rackham, better known as Calico Jack, rose from another captain's humiliation. When Charles Vane lost his crew's confidence, Rackham took command. That should have been the beginning of his legend. Instead, it became the setup for one of piracy's most embarrassing endings. Rackham had style. He had confidence. He had a famous name. But he was never the most frightening person on his own ship. That place belonged to Anne Bonny and Mary Red. By 1720, Rackham was operating around the Bahamas and Jamaica. When the authorities finally caught up with him, his final stand did not become a glorious battle. Later tradition remembered the men as unprepared, while Bonny and Reed showed more nerve than the captain himself. Rackham was tried, convicted, and hanged at Port Royal, Jamaica, in November 1720. Bonny and Red escaped immediate execution by pleading pregnancy. Rackham wanted to be remembered as a pirate captain. History remembered him as the man standing beside stronger legends, but the next pirate needed no one beside him. His name alone could empty a ship before the first shot was fired. Blackbeard. Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard, understood that terror was not only about violence, it was performance. The beard, the weapons, the smoke, the silence before attack. He created a character so frightening that some enemies surrendered before the fight began. But on November 22nd, 1718, at Ocracoke Inlet, fear met planning. Lieutenant Robert Maynard came hunting him with orders from Virginia's governor. Blackbeard thought he could overpower Maynard's small force, but Maynard turned his vessel into a trap, keeping men hidden until the pirates came close enough for the fight to shift. For once, Blackbeard's image could not do the work for him. He was killed in the battle, and afterward, Maynard displayed his head from the bowsprit of his vessel as proof that the most feared pirate in the region was dead. That display mattered. Governments did not only want pirates punished, they wanted legends dismantled in public. Blackbeard died fighting. The next man had once crossed paths with him, but his ending was not a warrior's fall. It was a gentleman's collapse. Stede Bonnet. Stede Bonnet did not come from the usual pirate world. He was a wealthy Barbados landowner, a man who seemed to choose piracy almost like a costume. That is why history remembers him as the gentleman pirate. But the sea does not reward fantasy. Bonnet bought a ship, gathered a crew, and tried to become what other pirates had become through war, hunger, and desperation. Then he crossed paths with Blackbeard, and his own command began to look fragile. He wanted the image of a pirate captain, but he never fully controlled the life that came with it. In 1718, his luck broke. After capture near the Carolina coast, he escaped for a short time, hid, and was recaptured. The delay only made the ending feel more certain. On December 10th, 1718, Stede Bonnet was executed at White Point in Charleston. He had pleaded for mercy, but the governor refused. Bonnet had wanted piracy to give him a legend. Instead, it gave him a public death. But even Bonnet's downfall had a reason people could understand. Edward Lowe's ending is darker because history itself seems unsure how to bury him. Edward Lowe. Edward Lowe belongs near the end because his story does not close like the others. He was active in the early 1720s when the Golden Age of Piracy was already being hunted down. His reputation was not built on charm, politics, or naval genius. It was built on cruelty. That made him feared. But fear is unstable. It can hold a crew together for a while, but eventually men begin to ask whether their own captain is more dangerous than the enemy chasing them. That is where Lowe's ending becomes difficult. Some accounts claim his crew finally turned against him. Other versions say he was later captured and hanged by the French. Some suggest he disappeared into rumor. Unlike Blackbeard, there was no famous trophy. Unlike Kidd, no clear scaffold scene. Unlike Roberts, no symbolic sea burial. Lowe became the pirate history could not fully finish. And that uncertainty works almost too well. A man who spread fear did not leave behind a clean ending, only conflicting shadows. But the last captain was different. His death was not just the end of one man. It felt like the sea closing over an entire age. Bartholomew Roberts. Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, was not only another pirate captain. He was one of the most successful pirates of the Golden Age. Some pirates became famous through one image, one battle, or one execution. Roberts built something larger: discipline, command, and a reputation that stretched across the Atlantic. That is why his death feels like the final act. In February 1722, HMS Swallow under Captain Challoner Ogle caught up with Roberts near Cape Lopez. This was not the collapse of a drunk crew in a harbor or a desperate plea before a judge. This was the Royal Navy tightening its grip around one of the last great pirate powers. Roberts was killed during the battle, but his crew made one final choice that turned his death into legend. They threw his body into the sea, following his wishes, so the authorities could not display him like other captured pirates. His body was never found. The Navy wanted proof. His men gave him to the water. And with Roberts gone, the black flag no longer looked like freedom. It looked like a warning that every pirate captain had refused to read. If history teaches anything, it is that power rarely ends peacefully. Subscribe for more forgotten rulers, rebels, killers, and kings who discovered that the final chapter is usually the cruelest. Comment which world you want uncovered next.